Hi, Rex Rogers with Sat 7. It's the end of a very long day, actually 15-hour day. The Sat 7 staff did something unique. We don't normally leave the hotel, and we stay in meetings the whole time we're together. But today at 7 o'clock in the morning, we got on a tour bus, probably 30 of us, and went 2.5 hours or so north of Beirut to the Kadisha Valley, which is a beautiful, very large valley that was carved centuries ago by the Kadisha River. Kadisha in Aramaic means holy, and that kind of references the fact that Christian groups over many centuries used that valley as a shelter or a refuge from persecution. And really for about 1,700 years, consistently, Christian groups lived in that valley without any outside influence or dominance by other religious groups whatsoever. And for at least 1,300 years, consistently, and still going on, they've celebrated the Easter resurrection in that valley. So pretty fascinating in that. It's a valley that's characterized by many natural caves and grottos, and of course there's other kinds of churches and seminaries and monasteries and other kinds of facilities that have been built over the centuries. But we went there and then took a 7-mile hike way down the valley and then way up alongside the hill. Quite high. Don't know exactly how high we were, but we were up there to a chapel or kind of an old monastery, really. And we had a priest join us, and we celebrated a Maronite Mass. And I actually got to read Scripture, 2 Corinthians 3, 1-6, during that particular Mass. So it was fascinating to participate in something a little different than I'm used to. And it was interesting to learn more about how people survived over many centuries in that area. And of course, they did a lot of things in contributing to Christian culture and outreach out from that throughout the Middle East and North Africa. So after the Kadisha Valley, we went on down to Kanubin. Kanubin is an area that's sort of the center, the heart of the Kadisha Valley, where the Christians developed their culture over those many centuries, and again experienced a little more exposure to what they did in times past. After that, we traveled, I don't know exactly what direction, frankly, because I was sitting in the bus and didn't get to sense of what direction we're going. But not far from there, we went to the Cedars of Lebanon, something I've heard about for 10 years, never got to do. Fascinating. These are the ones that remain, and there's about 30 or 40 trees there that are at least 1,000 years old. There's several others that are considered to be over 3,000 or 4,000 years old, and about 375 or so trees total that are protected now, rigorously protected, because that's all that remain. Because if you read in the Bible and other ancient literature, the cedars of Lebanon were famed in the ancient world and quite valued for the wood. Solomon used cedar wood for the first temple, and then the later rebuild of the temple also involved cedar wood. And so a lot of other references there. Beautiful trees, magnificent trees, and quite large and very tall, of course. And to be able to see them and see some of the dead ones as well as the live ones is pretty fascinating. And to walk among them, it's like being in a natural cathedral. And I've wanted to see those for a long, long time. So I consider it a great privilege to be able to visit that site. And I love trees anyway. And these are unique and historically unique. So that was a lot of fun. It's called the Forest of God. And it's called that not only because of the magnificence, the exquisite nature of those trees when you see them, their beauty, but also because it gives you a sense of being in a cathedral when you walk among them. But beyond that, again, it goes back to the fact that the Christian community, running from persecution and seeking to live out their lives in freedom, occupied that territory for many centuries. And they tried to live out their Christian faith and express it in nature itself by cultivating those trees, by developing certain kinds of gardens, by celebrating the resurrection on nearby so-called Perfection Mountain, and doing a few other things that historically are in evidence there, and pretty interesting, again, to learn more about that. So got to visit the Forest of God, the Cedars of Lebanon, and in the midst of that is something called the Jesus tree. Now this is pretty recent in terms of everything else that we've been talking about. This goes back within the last 15, 20 years. a poet and a sculptor named Rudy Rame, who is Lebanese, took about 5 years and carved into a dead cedar in the middle of those live cedars a depiction of the resurrection, or excuse me, the crucifixion and then the resurrection. So there's Jesus' face carved into that wood. There's Jesus hanging on the cross. There's a symbolism of his hands raised in the air on the branches. There's Eve with her back turned and her shame and sin carved into wood. And again, it's a very important natural carving, natural wood in a sense. Then, of course, the artist's carving, natural sculpture. So beautifully done. And I got some great pictures of that, of course, and had it explained to it. So that was quite fascinating to be able to experience it. And then, of course, we spent the day together and good fellowship and eating too much, because you always eat too much in Lebanon because food's so great, and they just keep bringing it and bringing it and bringing it. That's just part of the culture and part of their hospitality. So I really feel privileged to have visited the Kadisha Valley, but in particular the forest of God, the cedars of Lebanon that you can read so much about. I think 70 sometimes referenced in Scripture, cedar wood at least, referenced that often. And back in that day, all of the mountains of Lebanon were forested with these beautiful trees. And of course, have long since been harvested and gone, and you went through a whole period of deforestation, which is the result now of the rigorous protection of that one area where they've got these trees remaining to give you a sense of what they are and what they were. And on the Lebanese flag, if you don't know, this beautiful flag, red and white and green, the center of the flag is a cedar of Lebanon. Again, it's a unique flag among the heraldry of the world. I've always liked it and been attracted to it. Lebanese people, as always, are incredibly friendly and hospitable and a great people. And Lebanon is, as a country, more open, more religiously pluralistic than you will find in just about any other country in the Middle East and North Africa. And there are Christians here, there are Muslims, there are Druids, Druze, there are Maronites, and there are other subgroups, Christian groups that exist and religious groups that exist. And there are squabbles from time to time and tensions, but they've been able to maintain. And Lebanon is a country about the size of Connecticut, with maybe 4 million or 4.5 million people who live here. And on top of that, a good 2 million, according to United Nations estimates, of refugees from Syria and Iraq who have fled into Lebanon, and then trying to deal with them, help them, engage them in a way that it doesn't turn into a humanitarian crisis is one of the significant challenges of Lebanon today. So enjoy coming and heading home, Lord willing, tomorrow. And it's a great day again to see more excuse me, of the mountains and of the topography and the history of Lebanon.